you never want to burn bridges when you leave. You always kind of want to leave with class and, because you never know who's going to be at the next company.
This is the Construction Veteran Podcast. Construction Veterans Podcast. Connecting and celebrating veterans in construction. Now, here's your host, Scott Friend.
Welcome back to the Construction Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Friend. I'm excited to bring to you guys our first non-veteran guest. Naz is both a former and current colleague of mine who's an HR professional. She gives us some insight in what to look for when hiring a veteran, or for you vets that are transitioning out, what to look for in a company. Let's dig into it. Hey Naz, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm good. It's really good to talk to you again. It's been a little while.
I know. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on. So Naz and I know each other. We worked together at a former company, and I've mentioned before that I was the chair of a veterans group, and Naz and her team really helped us out quite a bit, get the thing going, helping us when we had questions, what to do, how we can rally the troops, no pun intended, and grow the thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what she does in the industry. So Naz is actually our first non-veteran guest, so I'm really excited, but she's a huge supporter, so that's why I wanted to have her on. So Naz, tell me, do you have any sort of a connection to the military?
I don't directly. Many, many years ago, I worked for a large defense contractor in the DC metro area, and that was my first introduction to all of the branches of the military. I started as a recruiting assistant, and eventually I started recruiting retired and transitioned military. And so what drew me to being a supporter and an ally was the strong camaraderie, but also the sense of work ethic, pride, and just that friendship and bond within this community. And so I just have never let that go. I still talk to many of the people that I had recruited. And then also I volunteered for several years with some transition assistance offices locally, and I would go in and help transition military write resumes or teach them some interview skills, kind of like transitioning from military to corporate gray. So.
Very cool. So did you ever work in a TAP program, the transition assistance?
I did. Yes,
Oh,
I
cool.
Volunteered. Yes, that
Very
was the
cool.
exact program.
I think that's so neat that you've kept in touch with a lot of people that you've recruited in the past. That's neat. And it's nice to get kind of...
some of those...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Some of those individuals were somewhat mentors of mine. I think what they learned in the military, they kind of taught me as far as, chain of commands or problem-solving skills, and I still use a lot of that today.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm performing under pressure. That's another big thing that I think vets are used to that, obviously in a dangerous environment. So yes. I want to ask you about the TAP program too, because a lot of people have different feedback, I'll say, and I have my own opinions. I went through it when I transitioned. What do you think that the TAP program could do better? And keep in mind too, it's obviously different by post and location, but what do you think one thing that they're maybe falling short on that they could do better?
Sure. I think when I was volunteering in that program, it was a very one-size-fits-all lens, and I think we need to change that. I think there's different career paths, there's different ways of approaching employers, using social media. I think back then it was so through one lens. I think the world of applying to a new role and the talent market is certainly different. So I would say be a little bit more diverse in your thinking.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I don't know what your experience was, what base you were working with, but I don't recall them ever suggesting the construction industry, whether it's construction management or the trades, as being an option when you get out, except for, hey, this is probably bottom of the barrel stuff you don't want to do. What was your experience with that?
You're 100% right. That was 100% my experience. What they tried to do is really push towards the technology and professional services, construction never came up. I will say from experience, construction is an amazing industry. It's very fluid, and there are tons of opportunities. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I wish I could say that you're the only one that's told me about that, but that it's sad. I mean, I hear that from a lot. That was my personal situation that I never heard about that. It was a lot of IT stuff, and that just wasn't my thing. And nothing
Right.
against those folks going into that industry, but you're absolutely right that it was this one size fits all, that you got to get into this industry and you're going to flip burgers or dig a ditch. So I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with digging a ditch? There's nothing wrong with hard work. So,
Yeah.
so let's talk about what you do now, Naz. Obviously we work together, so she and I are colleagues. So what do you do currently?
So I am responsible for the operations and strategy of HR, all people related, for a large GC in the area, the same GC you work for. And, I have a lot of roles or functions, anywhere from talent acquisition, right, recruiting team members, to the employee experience, making sure our employees feel valued and welcomed, but also performance management, rewards and recognition, also training and development. How are we training our people to be the next leaders, or to advance in their careers here? And then all the way to retirement, like it's a whole employee life cycle that we, take care of and look at. So multifunctional, Scott.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So, one similarity that I see with what you do and a lot of veterans, it's that love for people. It's that respect for just the human being, right? We're not robots. So it's
Right.
what they care about. So you talked a little bit about what you did prior and you helped people transition to that company, but you continue to do that. So our last employer, when we worked together in that group, you still had that drive. So what was it that got you interested in supporting those veterans at that company?
Honestly, I'm going to be a little bit personal here. So I am first generation American, and my parents migrated from the Middle East here. I think I just appreciate the military service and the individuals that served and sacrificed their lives for my freedom and everyone else's freedom. So I don't know what it is. I just feel like this is my way of showing my appreciation, and I will always be an ally. It's not just one thing that triggered it. I think it's just kind of what's in my heart.
Yeah, I love that. So, I'm not speaking for everybody here, but I did have an experience to live overseas myself. And I think sometimes we do take some things for granted, maybe, because we don't realize a lot of the freedoms that we have here that other people don't. So it's
Right.
very easy to criticize the country that we're living in until you see it from the other side. The grass isn't always greener. So I'm glad you shared that. By all means, get as personal as you want. We can always edit post show, right? So by all means.
No problem.
So what is it that got you into human resources in the first place? So this doesn't have to be related to the service, but let's go back. Naz is
Sure.
growing up. You have a passion for this. What caused that?
So I started my first work experience in retail. I wasn't good enough to be on the sales floor at a clothing store, so they put me in the stock room, and I just, ironed clothes and put them on hangers. But I have always been extroverted. I get my energy from people, and I was working, after school, nights and weekends in retail, and this one woman approached me. I guess she liked my attitude or my customer service skills, and asked me if I would be interested in a corporate job. And I didn't even know what to say. I said, sure. And so really someone just reached out to me and took kind of a leap of faith on me based on my first impression. And so I interviewed with the company. I didn't even know what a resume was at that time, so I put something together based on what my mom and dad told me to do. And I interviewed, and I ended up getting the job. I started out in a very, junior level administrative position. I supported the director of HR at that company, and I learned a lot from her. And I looked up to her. And so, I just said, I want to be someone like her when I grow up. And I worked really hard. I made really good connections. I listened. I worried about myself and not others. And eventually I got promoted and promoted to the next level. And that's how I got into HR. I don't know if you study for HR, if that makes sense. I think sometimes more so than not, you fall into HR.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
makes
fell into
sense.
HR.
Sure. No, it absolutely does make sense. And, I know there's certifications and different courses you can take, but I think there's some
Yeah.
things that you just can't teach. The integrity, there's obviously some private things that people share with you and, how to understand
Yeah.
and navigate those situations. And I think that just comes from experience. So it's great that you had a mentor that walked you through all that. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you fell into it. So if you had to change paths, if you had to go back, however long ago that was, if you go back to the girl ironing and stocking shelves, and you had a
Yeah.
different option that fell in your lap, what was it that you think you would have done other than HR?
If we're being honest, I wanted to be a marine biologist, but I'm not
Wow.
sure you're going to get that here on the East Coast.
Cool.
Back then I grew up in Los Angeles, so
Oh,
it was
yeah,
a little
that makes
bit
more
different,
sense.
but
Sure.
I don't know. I really love what I do. I will tell you, I have a daughter, and I have talked to her about the construction industry. And I told her, it's there's the field and then the operations side, and both are very lucrative. Both are stable and always needed. And I didn't know growing up that there's all this opportunity. Growing up, they're like, you're a teacher, you're a lawyer, or a doctor, or an engineer. So yeah, I'm actually trying to spread the word about the construction industry.
That's good. So I'm glad you said that. A lot of people don't know the options within the industry. So one thing I'm doing with this podcast is showing people the different avenues. So obviously HR is one. I'm
Yes.
curious though, from your standpoint, what would you want to tell people? They usually, I'll say, typically there's two paths. I would say if you're working for a construction company, whether that's the
Sure.
field or the operations side in the office. What would you want to say to folks to kind of educate them? And I'll kind of give you some leaders here. So, or some leading questions. In the field, they
Sure.
typically think like me as a superintendent, I have a clipboard and coffee and I walk around and yell at people all day. Totally not true.
Right.
I do
Totally
drink,
not true.
well, I drink a ton of coffee, but that's probably the only true fact there. But and then the PMs, all they are just barking orders and playing with money, counting beans all day, right? So what
Yeah.
would you say? What does a PM really do? How I want to know from your opinion, and what does a superintendent really do?
Okay, I will answer both, but first I'd like to say that before I even got into the construction industry, I did have these preconceived notions of like, okay, superintendents are just like steel-toed boots and they're dirty and they're, just grumpy and yelling at people, 100%. I didn't really know what a PM was on the construction side, so I didn't know. But don't believe the hype, right? It's not true. So my understanding of what PMs do, I've been in this industry now going on 7 years. They are partners with our field or our superintendent team members, and they manage the budget, they manage the client and the architect, and they work very, very closely with the superintendents to ensure that our jobs get done on time within budget, but also are beautiful jobs that our clients love and then come back for more. So that's kind of what I think operations do. They also problem solve all day long. And they're also pivoting, right? The client changes their mind on something, we've got to pivot and, kind of reinvent something that they're going to like. From the field side, gosh, that is such a management challenge. I think you have to be a true leader to be a superintendent. You are not just walking a job. You are managing people. You're putting out fires. You're managing subcontractors. You're also managing the client. You're bringing people for walks on your job site. You're also dealing with OSHA. It is just so many different types of people and functions all in one. It's probably one of the most important roles in a GC, because without our superintendents, we would have no jobs and we wouldn't be able to deliver for our clients. So I think it's one of the most important rules.
That's good stuff. And then the steel toe boots and the dirty and grumpiness, that's also kind of true, I'm going to be honest. But we're not always yelling at people.
Steel toe boots is part of your PPE, right?
Right.
So
Bingo.
I don't think we can get away from that.
Exactly. So there's a guy out there named Jason Schroeder. He's really big on the lean side of the industry. And he said something I really appreciated that I think he heard from somebody else, a mentor in his early career, that a good superintendent knows how to see the future. So we got to look, 6 to 12 weeks down the road on what am I not doing now?
Schedule.
Exactly. Yeah. So what am I not doing at this moment that's going to bite me 6 to 12 weeks down the road? And one thing you said I want to hit on too is that a lot of companies, I think, or not a lot, some companies are structured where the superintendent does work for the project manager, but typically in large general contractors like we work for, that's just not the case, and we're equal. So we can't survive without one another. And I think it's really important. We've got to know each other's job too. So when I'm picking up the phone saying, hey, I really need this right now, they know why there's so much stress in my voice that I need something immediately because it'll hurt the job. Or when they're calling me saying, hey, we can't proceed with XYZ because it's going to cost us some money. So we've got to work together as a team. So that's one thing. I want to clear that up with people that, I think superintendents really get a bad rep out there sometimes too. And our leadership has talked about, we're kind of this mix of blue and white collar. So we are out there in the field with folks, and sometimes we are in the mud with them, but we're also managing the process too. So, so you said you'd be a marine biologist. So what about, what sparked that interest?
I just, I lived on the West Coast. I loved the beach. I had a marine biology class in high school and loved it. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So, just a California kid and kind of dreaming like that.
Oh, we're going to edit the California out. I mean, I tape from Texas, so I got to be careful.
Okay, yes.
No, all good. Okay, so switching back to our discussion about vets. So I think a big struggle right now, there's a lot of veterans getting out of the service, and the big talk is this transition. Hey, what are we going to do? I can tell you from my experience, it's extremely scary going into the working world. Thankfully, we have folks like you that are willing to lend a hand. So if you had a vet sitting across the table from you that didn't know what they wanted to do, what would you say to them to try to get them to join either the construction industry or HR as a whole?
I would say keep an open mind, get your foot in the door. There's multiple opportunities once you get your foot in the door. And employers need to be much better at embracing our vets. Just because what we're looking for on their resume doesn't exist doesn't mean that they're not going to be the next amazing team member, the next amazing employee. I think both employer and the vet needs to keep an open mind. Once you get your foot in the door, you can go into HR, you can go into finance and accounting, you can go into graphics design, marketing, construction, superintendent side, or the PM side. It's not just one role. And so I think, you just got to get your foot in the door and be open to the work. And then once you're open to the work, really the career path kind of guides itself.
Okay, so how would you suggest them to get their foot in the door? I totally agree. What path would you suggest? There's a lot of them, but maybe just give a couple that you would suggest them to go down.
So I'm not here to endorse anything, but I have partnered with Hiring Our Heroes in the past. That's a good avenue, but also like LinkedIn, your podcast, networking with other individuals. I share my network with anyone that wants to have it. So if someone sees my network and they see someone I know, ask for an introduction. People love to help other people. I think people are genuinely good people, and ask for a network in, LinkedIn invite or a connection. Reach out to people on, social media or LinkedIn to try to get just a conversation starting. People will see that initiative, that drive, that grit, And that's what I think employers are looking for more these days than just, the keywords on a resume.
Yeah, that's good. So what if I'm out there and I do want to go into construction, but I think, hey, if I choose one route, I'm going to get pigeonholed into what I'm doing. And maybe that's a type of construction or a role within the industry. So, hey, I want to be a super, but then they realize maybe I don't. Maybe I want to be a PM. What would you say to people that might have the misconception about getting pigeonholed?
So that can happen. I would say be vocal with your managers, with your leadership. It's okay to change, paths. A good employer, an employer who is engaged with you, will say like, okay, Naz, I see that, you were superintendent, but you're more leaning towards the operations. Let's give you a chance. A good employer would do that. I don't have the best answer on what to do, but I would say that, communication and also honing in on what you do best. What are your strong suits? What are your strong skills? And just kind of work on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they're just kind of afraid to speak up sometimes, but
Yeah.
I've talked about before, nobody's a mind reader. They're not going to know unless you bring it up. Nobody's going to know what your desires are, but you have to share that. And I think coming from the veteran background, I think a lot of that stems from things have changed for the positive in the military with that. However, there used to be this, hey, keep your goals and admirations tight to the vest. You don't want people knowing. So, for example, one thing I heard a lot, I had some friends that went into special operations and they didn't want to share that. And I never understood why. Part of it was because there was this awkward culture that people would kind of look down on you like, oh, you think you're better than us? When in all reality, that wasn't the case at all. So I think people need to get more brave to share what they want to do. I haven't ever experienced that in my career. It might be a cultural thing with some folks, depending on what their upbringing is, where they're from, where they're at in the States, where they're living, or what type of construction they're on or in, excuse me. And I've had some folks on the podcast that get into these very niche types of construction, which can be extremely profitable for them personally and for the company. But man, if that's your thing and you want to go build that, for example, I had a guy, Mark Blackwelder, you might remember him. He worked with us in the past. So I interviewed him. He got into pharmaceutical construction. I didn't even know that was really a thing. I knew healthcare, but he's doing very well for himself. So you got to speak up. You got to be humble. You got to say something.
Yes.
And I've said before, the worst somebody can do is say no. And I think there are bad bosses out there, right, that might say, well, no, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do this. And if that's the case and you're in a toxic environment, you might want to look elsewhere too. So I think one thing, veterans, one thing we can do now that we couldn't do in the service, and I'm not suggesting everybody jump ship by any means, but if it's really not that good of a fit for you and the company, is you can leave. I wouldn't suggest it. I mean, I think right now we're going through a shortage of people, good people.
Yeah.
And you're more than welcome to get into that if you'd like, but you do have that freedom. You have to do at the end of the day what's best for you and for your family, and make sure
that's right.
You got your culture has to align with the company. Period.
100%. But don't leave without another opportunity lined up.
Oh, 100%. And I have seen people do that too, and it hurts them. I've seen people not give notice and just up and leave. And I'll tell you from experience in the past, I've been on a project where we had a project manager from a subcontractor just leave. And, I don't know the ins and the outs. I'm not sure what happened. But man, that put the whole project in a really tight pinch because he took a lot of that information with him. People didn't know how to get a hold of him. And it really hurt us all as a whole. Whereas I'm sure if he said he was leaving, we could have done something about it.
Yeah. But also, we work in very small industries. People relocate. These larger companies know a lot of other people. You never want to burn bridges when you leave. You always kind of want to leave with class and, because you never know who's going to be at the next company.
Yeah, leave with class. I like that. And I'd say the same thing getting out of the service. I have run into people that I've served with or I knew of, and word gets around. I mean, the military might be very large, but
Yes.
wow. I mean, especially in our industry, it might be big.
Right.
I'll use Dallas, for example, and DC, I know for a fact is the same way. Everybody kind of knows everybody. It's like that, what is it, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? Um,
Yes. Or they know who to call,
exactly. Yeah, so they
you
know
know?
people, but that can
Yeah,
also work.
that's right.
That can be a benefit. If you are,
100%.
yeah, if you're looking to move up in your career, if you're transitioning out of the service, you know, somebody also once said, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. So if they know the guy to call or the girl to call, hey, I know this person that's looking for a position.
Right.
We need an intern. Well, why don't we call this
I like
individual?
that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what other advice would you have for veterans, maybe that are in the industry, have been in the industry for a while, and they're looking to make a change, maybe not path, but they're looking to make a change to maybe up their career as well? And how can they leverage their service in that?
Number one, stay relevant. You know, I think sometimes we as humans just get complacent. Like, I'm doing a good job. Isn't that enough? I'm a hard worker. Isn't that enough? And sometimes, no, it's not. Like, Scott, look at you, for example. Like, you are doing all of this outside of your day job, and you are elevating. You are staying current. And not everyone needs to host a podcast, but, you know, attend industry events or read some blogs, get on these podcasts, stay relevant to this ever-changing market, and keep current. You have to also invest in your own professional development. That doesn't cost any money, right? Reading, networking, staying relevant, that can all be very free, so it doesn't have to cost anything to invest in your own professional development.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, people do, I think that holds them back a lot is what's it going to cost me? And there are too many resources out there to not do that. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think using your resources, using your network, maybe sometimes we think, I don't want to call so-and-so, and I feel uncomfortable. You never know until you ask. And like you said, I love what you said. I'm not a mind reader. I can't read your mind. So speak up, communicate, network above, and you know, vets have such a great reputation because of their training. It's very attractive to employers because of their work ethic, because of their training. So, you know, I think there's an advantage there. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, and a lot of companies too. Let's say you're currently in the industry. I know a lot of companies, ours included, a lot of times they'll support you in furthering your career, whether that's maybe you want a certain certification or maybe you want to further your education. There's a lot of companies that will help you do that. Sometimes they want some sort of a commitment at the back end. You know, hey, I'm going to stay with this company X amount of years. I get that. But that's similar to what we did in the service. Let's say you're a reservist and they're going to pay for your school. Well, you owe the reserves a certain amount of time after that. So if you use your GI Bill, like I'm all out. I've completely used up my GI Bill. And so when I was in the reserves, I wanted them to pay for the rest of my master's, but then realized, I owe them, I think it was going to be something like 8 years more. And we weren't willing to do that. You know, in hindsight's 2020, because I did resign my commission. I'm not out of the reserve, so I'm glad I didn't do that. But yeah, you're right. You got to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Employers offer education assistance programs where they'll reimburse you for a bachelor's or master's degree. There's also, outside of the education assistance program, sometimes a training budget, and they'll, like you said, pay for a certification, and you know that doesn't hit their education assistance program. So a lot of times, if I'm gonna tell a friend to recommend or go after some of this stuff, I'd put together like a 5 to 10 bullet like business plan on why I would like this certification, and that really goes a long way. 5 or 10 minutes of prep time to request something will go a long way. And you're right. If the employer does provide this, they'll probably ask for like a 1-year stay. But I think that's pretty competitive and standard.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty fair. So if you had someone come across your desk that's going to be a new hire to our company, that's a transitioning veteran, what do you want to hear from that person? Because I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, I assume, so you're the first line that they talk to, is that right?
Well, our recruiting manager is,
Okay.
but I do look at the resumes. But, I started in recruiting, so I love recruiting. What would I look for on their resume? I know this sounds really basic, but no spelling errors.
Yeah, that's good.
Because to me, if you are misspelling things, how easy is it to run spell check? You're not paying attention to the details, and maybe you don't take pride in your work. Like, have a clean resume with 0 spelling errors. That's like pretty simple. But I'm looking for, kind of what I think of like when I do behavioral interviewing. I'm looking for a problem. I'm looking for what they did as the solution and what the outcome was. And it doesn't even have to be related to whatever vacancy we have. I'm looking for a certain behavior. And, once a person exhibits certain behaviors over and over again, the likelihood of them doing it at an employer, at a new company, is highly likely. So you're looking for behaviors.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so we get them in the door. You guys like the resume. Let's say you're the hiring manager. What do you want to hear from that individual?
I want to hear the truth. I want to hear them speak about their experiences. I want to hear a desire to work for the company. I want to know that they did research on the company and they actually care to work here. And that they're passionate, they're driven, they have grit, they have, experiences that would be valuable at a company like ours. So, you kind of want authentic people that have a lot of drive and that can execute.
That's good. Yeah. Well, cool. Naz, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Again, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave, whether it's about, veterans in the industry, veterans coming into the industry, or HR as a whole?
Well, I just want to thank all the veterans for their service. I am just so proud to live in this country, and, with all the freedoms we have. Just some advice as far as transitioning: be yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Network. Use these resources to your advantage. And, I wish nothing but success for our job hunting veterans.
Awesome. And I say from the vet community, thank you, Naz. As a first generation American, that's just really encouraging to hear. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. See ya.
If you're a military veteran in the construction industry, or you're in the construction industry and support our military vets, then you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can find me at constructionvetpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me there at Scott Friend. Let's share the stories and motivate others.